Hello everyone, this is Brian Greer with Tax Connects, and I'm joined again by one of my partners, Jeff Meggs, and today's topic is voluntary disclosures. So Jeff, can you tell us what is a voluntary disclosure agreement, or we often refer to it as a VDA?
Yeah, so in the sales and use tax world, it's not uncommon for companies to fall out of compliance or never get into compliance effectively when they're supposed to. And as a result, they start to accumulate prior period issues and exposure. The voluntary disclosure programs are affording taxpayers the opportunity to come clean with the jurisdictions. These are typically state-level administered programs, fairly formalized, and it just affords a company to take a look at their prior periods and come forward, disclose that they've got an issue, and work something out with the state.
And under, what facts and circumstances would someone pursue something like this?
Yeah, so when we talk to companies who've been in business for a number of years, typically the way the economy is today, they're in a multi-state sort of facet. They're doing business with customers all over the country. And as we talked about in our Nexus discussion, there's certainly a lot of opportunity to establish Nexus and a responsibility to comply with the state sales tax laws and not realize it. And so a lot of companies get into a position sometimes or find themselves in circumstances where they had Nexus previously, they had some taxable sales or activities, and they need to mitigate that risk and exposure.
Okay. And if I'm a taxpayer looking at this VDA type of program, what are some of the benefits that I would get out of it? Why would I do it?
Yeah, so there's really two primary benefits to these VDA programs. One is you get automatic penalty abatement. Now, it's not such that some of the states will impose some type of penalty if you've already charged and collected the tax, but have yet to remit it. Most of the companies we work with in a VDA capacity have never charged tax. And in most of those scenarios, the states are agreeable to a full waiver of penalties. The second primary benefit is what we refer to as a limited look back. And in that scenario, basically the state is saying, if you have not charged and collected any tax from your customers, we'll only go back as far as our general statute of limitations, which is usually 3, maybe 4 years, which affords companies that have been doing business for 7, 5, 10 years or so to kind of carve off those older years out of this entire disclosure process. And in essence, they are mitigating that risk automatically.
Okay. And I know the taxpayer would have to pay that tax from those during that look back period, but that advantage of getting the waiver for years 4, 5, and 6 and beyond could be a big benefit to a lot of businesses. Maybe you could provide us some specific examples as to when a company would or would not pursue something like this.
Yeah, so as Brian just said, one of the aspects of doing a VDA is it's going to take some cash to get through the process. You do have to satisfy those liabilities that are within the VDA look-back period. Most of our clients and prospects don't consider passing that tax burden down to their customer, although they may have that as an option. So there's a cash outlay that's pretty significant or could be pretty significant. When we think about sort of the varieties of companies that both qualify for a voluntary disclosure and would want to go forward with voluntary disclosure, two things come to mind. One is they've got significant risk and exposure beyond that look-back period. So in those years 5, 6, and 7, they've got a lot of the risk and exposure and liability there that they can basically wash away through the voluntary disclosure programs. That's a good reason to consider it. Another good reason is companies that are looking to sell the business or bring on venture capital funding. A lot of times they're going to be going through a due diligence effort. And in that capacity, these VC companies or the acquirer may identify that they've got this prior period risk and exposure and force their hand or escrow the tax liabilities associated with those periods. So those are some of the reasons why you'd want to go down the path of the VDA. One of the reasons you might not want to go down that path is maybe you haven't exposed yourself beyond the last year or two. So all of your liability is really within that statute of limitations, that 3-year look-back period. And so really the only benefit you're getting out of VDA is penalty abatement. And you're going to come out of pocket pretty significantly with the tax payment you're going to make. So it's just an opportunity to evaluate talk with somebody that might be able to walk you through that process and step through it in a more logical, knowledgeable fashion.
So Jeff, as we wrap up, you had mentioned perhaps getting advice in terms of what that process looks like to do a VDA. Can you take us quickly through some of the steps of what that VDA process looks like?
Yeah, there's really three primary steps. One step, you've got to apply for the program. A lot of times that's a very informal process. We commonly do that on an anonymous basis through a third-party consultant. The second step of that process is reviewing the documents from the state, signing the agreements, and evaluating your tax liabilities and doing the calculation, formal calculation. And then the last step of the process is submitting all your paperwork, paying the tax, and then finalizing the voluntary disclosure process, which includes registering and compliance prospectively.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. And if you're interested in learning more about the voluntary disclosure agreement process, we have a great ebook available on our website, so you can check that out. And also just stay tuned for additional sales tax discussions. Thank you.